Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making time and joining us wherever you are coming from. And also, good afternoon to some of you who are joining us from middle of the day because we've got Dr. J. Smith with us tonight. I hope you can hear me clearly and picture is all clear. So let me just go to Jay and say hi to Jay. Jay?
Hey, well, hello, Hatun. Listen,
Piece
you
of
know, very healthy, and I know this is a difficult time for you to come on. God bless you, sister. Way over there in the United Kingdom. I'm here in the United States. We prayed for you. We want to give you strength because you need strength tonight.
Thank you. Can I just get your permission for the privacy? Are you giving permission to be recorded in this live stream?
Yep, absolutely.
And Jay, I feel that you think it's hot over there, and then you've got sound behind you.
Let me go turn it off.
Yes, please, because I just got a message that there is a bad echo. I assume it's because of the bad echo. And also, I apologize for those of you. Some of you were waiting for us to be live last night, but we live in a broken world, and sometimes things doesn't go the way we do plan. So sorry we couldn't make yesterday, but by the grace of God, we are here tonight with Dr. J. Smith. Jay.
Yes, hello, Hatun.
Well, it's been a couple of weeks. I haven't seen you. So how have you been? How is life?
Good. Well, since the last time we talked, which was, again, another live stream where we were talking on the same subject that we're going to do tonight, I have been to Paraguay. I've been to Brazil. I have been training, teaching, filming, and also having great discussions with Paraguayans and Argentinians, actually from 11 different countries. I don't speak a word of Spanish, and it's my first time that I've ever been in a Spanish-speaking world.
Did you learn any word in Spanish?
Mahraba. That's not manara. That's where all these different words. You want me to speak in Spanish?
like, were you able to get like hi or
instead?
Lord Jesus.
How are you doing?
Okay.
Bueno.
So, how long were you there for, Jay?
I was there for a week. I was there last week, and I dipped back and forth between Brazil and Paraguay. And I went to one of these most amazing falls I've ever seen. It's a 3-kilometer wide fall, the largest, widest fall in the world, 2 miles long, 3 kilometers, and extended the entire length. And I was fascinated. One of the wonders of the world. I think it's one of the 9 wonders, natural wonders of the world. And it's the first time I've ever been there. First time I've even heard of it. I didn't even know that it existed until I went to see it. And I went with some of our Brazilian brothers. And Hatun, if you ever get a chance to go to Brazil or Argentina or Paraguay, you've got to go to these falls.
Well, those places looks very far.
They are far, and they're well worth it when you get there.
Well, God's creation is amazing anyway. And also thanks for being faithful to the Lord and traveling around the world to serve him. So just a couple of housekeeping principles for those of you who are joining us in chat. We will be discussing second compilation of the Quran under the Uthman. So since the topic is Quran, can I just gently encourage you to stick to the topic so we can have healthy discussions, as well as those of you who are kind of going to debate or discuss the issues through chat, can you please try to be nice and kind to one another so that we can have healthy discussions. I don't know yet, but we might be able to turn up the Skype if there is anyone who is really, really struggling to communicate with us through chat. We can turn up the Skype and then you can call in. If you want anything to get our attention of DCCI, can you please put @ in front of the DCCI ministries? So that will be appear in the chat as read. Hopefully it will get my attention or Jay's attention. And also huge thank you for all of the brothers and sisters who are adminning the chat. We are really grateful for you.
Hatun, do you have people that are going to send questions to us?
Yeah, so we do have brothers who are in the chat who are adminning, and then when people ask their questions or make their comments, if they put @ in front of the DCCI ministries, we will be able to see it.
Okay, I'm following the chat over here on another computer.
Okay, then in that case, both of us need to keep eye on it. Okay, so last time when we were together, as you expressed, we talked about the first completion of the Quran. We talked about the Quran, which Abu Bakr practiced Buddha alongside of other Muslim leaders, and then they put the first Quran together with because Muhammad didn't do it, people were dying in the battle, approximately 70 people. Suddenly Islamic world messed up. They decided to put together the first Quran.
Hatun, let me do a quick overview just to save you time and also energy. Let me do a quick overview. This is what we did 2 weeks ago. Remember 2 weeks ago, Hatun, we went and we opened up Al-Bukhari, and we opened up volume 6, book 61, hadith number 509. And to summarize what we did 2 weeks ago is just exactly what you said there. This first hadith, which is 509, refers to the time period that Abu Bakr was caliph. He was only caliph for 2 years. And this was immediately after Muhammad's death. So from 632 to 634, as a caliph, he and Umar, the two of them, were talking about the Battle of Yamama. And when we open up onto 509, they are remonstrating with the fact that at the Battle of Yamama, many of those who had memorized the Quran had been killed. 70, as you said, according to other sources, doesn't say so in Al-Bukhari, but in other sources it says 70 were killed. Now the dilemma here is, if 70 were killed, the problem is that nothing was written down. There had been no Quran written in any codex and any book form at the time of Muhammad's death. So this was a difficulty, because if they were dependent on those who had memorized it, and these are the companions who had memorized it, if that was what they were dependent on to retain the Quran, these memorizers, those who had put it to memory, were dying off. What would happen if they all died off? And this is the problem with memorization, to say nothing of the fact whether or not they all memorized the same thing, or that they all memorized the same book or the same portions. So this was a dilemma, and that's why they called Zaid bin Thabit. Now, Zaid bin Thabit, Hatun, was the secretary of Muhammad. He was called in front of Abu Bakr and Umar, and it says there in 509 that they asked him, therefore, to write down the Quran. His response was, how can I do something that the Prophet didn't even do, that Muhammad didn't even do? Which is very clear to all of us who are reading this, that the Quran had not been written down. Muhammad had never done this. This is something he had never taken time to do. And that's why he was questioning whether he should be able to be the one to do that. They nonetheless continue to insist that he does it, saying this would be a good thing if he were to do it. He then relents. And what he does next then, Hatun, is he then goes and he starts searching for these bits and pieces of the Quran. And the place he searches are on bones, stones, and also on palm leaves. That's according to Al-Bukhari, volume 6, book number 61, hadith number 509. And also the memory of those who have been retained, those who still survived. This is those who were not killed at the Battle of Yamama. He then writes down that Quran, the final Quran, the Quran that was commissioned by Abu Bakr and Umar. He then writes it down. He remembers that there was one surah that he had missed, and he had to go to a man who he found it. Only with that man could he find this, and that's chapter 9, verse 128, 129. Actually, it's 2 ayahs. And writes that down. Now that Quran, that's the first copy. So that's why we call it the first Quran. Am I correct, Hatun? That's what we named our previous episode,
Yeah.
the first Quran.
Yeah.
So that first Quran was written in between 632 to 634, after Muhammad died. That Quran then is given to Umar's daughter, Hafsa, who is also, or was also, the wife of Muhammad. And what we do know from other sources is that she then kept that Quran under her bed. So no copies were made of that Quran. It was just retained in her house. No one, therefore, for 20 years, no one read that Quran. Am I correct?
We don't know if they haven't read it yet, but we know there were disagreements with that Quran when Uthman stepped into the world.
Well, here's the problem, and I won't even question that, because if she keeps it under her bed, then what are these other Qurans that start to appear in Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan and these other places, these outlying areas? This is what Muslims tell us today, that other Qurans start to appear. Well, yes, if you don't make a copy of the first one, you're going to have lots of different variations. Am I correct? Since no copies were made of this first Quran, we don't know, there's no reference here that copies were made. Only this final copy was given to Hafsa, and she kept it to herself. So no one else had a book. No one else had a codex. Now we're coming to today's subject.
Yeah, so that's the time when Sahih Bukhari 510 steps in with Uthman and Uthman's completion of the second Quran. But before we move on that, Jay, let me just bring up a couple of questions. There is a question from Mr. Kish. Guys, I don't know how to spell those names, so you have to kind of give good ears to.
It's Mr. Kish.
Assume I'm talking to you, okay? It says, I have Islamic sources which says that before Uthman burned the Qurans, there were Qurans with 110, 114, and 116 surahs. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. So we've got Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran, which is in Damascus, contains 115 chapters. Ibn Masud's Quran in Kufa, 111 chapters. Abu Musa in Basra, 116 chapters. And Uthman's Quran under the Zaid bin Thabit, 114 chapters. Let me bring you the second question, Jay. A question from Charles Martel. Is there any Uthmanic manuscripts complete or fragments that we can compare to the Hafs?
Okay, can we hold on to that question till later on? That's a good question, but we're kind of jumping the gun because we're already referencing Uthman. Let's go back to what you said earlier, and let's still stick with this, what we call the first Quran, Abu Bakr's Quran.
Yeah.
And let's ask some questions about that.
Okay, I'm gonna give you another question. Are there any non-Islamic sources that refer to the Quran or any writings from or about Muhammad before Uthman?
Brilliant. That's what I wanted to get to.
That question from Marcus Halliday.
Great question, Marcus. And that's the million-dollar question that no one wants to talk about. That's the big elephant in the room. In other words, here is a problem that Muslims have never dealt with. If this is such a major book, if this is such a major time in history, if this is an empire that by the time Uthman comes to power, it stretches from Afghanistan all the way up over most of North Africa. If this was such a huge place that was under their control, certainly someone somewhere should have known about these incidents, should have known about these characters, and should have known about this book called the Quran. Why is there no reference to this book called the Quran anywhere from any other sources? There are references to Arabs who are, yes, they are pillaging and they are all taking over. They are actually, they are going to war and winning wars against hold on a minute, I'm not going to call them Muslims because there's no reference to the word Muslim in any of these sources. People are getting attacked and defeated by Arabs, but the names that they give to themselves are not Muslim. The people who are actually pillaging and taking over Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, these cities that you're talking about, in Kufa, all these places in Iraq and what is today Iran and what is today Syria and what is today Israel, all these major cities are being attacked and they are being conquered by these Arabs, but they don't call themselves Muslims. That's the first problem. They call themselves Muhajirun. They call themselves Saracens. They call themselves Hagarenes from the line of Hagar. They call themselves Ishmaelites from the line of Ishmael. They call themselves anything but Muslims. And that's what's curious. So these people are defeating other people. They are conquering. They are taking over these cities. There is no reference in any of their works or in those who are being conquered about people called Muslims. There is no reference about a religion called Islam in any of these documentations. There is no reference to a book called the Quran, but there is reference to someone named Muhammad. We have a number of references. We have the Doctrina Iacobi, which comes from 634, that refers to him by name. But it doesn't say that he is a prophet. It doesn't refer to him as a Muslim. It doesn't refer to him receiving a book called the Quran. And it's fascinating that in 660s, there is writings by what they call the Chronicles of Sabaeus, where he does refer to Muhammad by name. So Muhammad is known, but he's not known as the man that Muslims provide for us today. He is not the Muhammad that we read about in Ibn Hisham. He is not the Muhammad that we read about in Al-Tabari or in Al-Bukhari, even in these references that we're looking at today. That's not the Muhammad we see in history, and that's not the religion that we see that is expanding and conquering these cities across North Africa. They are Arabs, they are known as Saracens, they are known as Muhajiruns, which means people of the Hijr, people of the Exodus. That means nomadic. They do refer to themselves as Ishmaelites and Hagarenes, which makes sense because the Arabs do find their lineage through Ishmael back to Hagar and Abraham, that route. And certainly they are conquering the two, and they have moved over and they are conquering the Sassanids. The Sassanids are the Persians. The Persians were defeated by these Arabs. The Byzantines were not. And the Byzantines were the other great superpower who were standing against this Arab power. So that you do see historical. What is curious is that none of the other facts that we've been talking about, none of this other material does exist in any of these historical accounts, including the accounts from those who are being conquered. So the question is, do we hear about this from other? No, we don't. We don't hear about any Quran. We don't hear about any Muslims or Islam. We don't hear about a place called Mecca. And these are damaging from the historical standpoint for those who claim everything that we have heard so far from the Muslim classical account is to be accepted and is considered to be correct.
So that we can have another session on the history of the Islam, which we will see if we have that session or when we have that session. We will see actually history of Islam destroys the traditional account of Islam and destroys the real history, but that's all different topic. So as we said, so last time we left when the first Quran was compiled and passed on Hafsa. So let's pick it up from there and then go to Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, hadith 510. And then from that we pick it up. Jay, have you got that on your screen? Did you work that out or?
Let's try it. Let's see.
If you didn't work it out,
still hasn't worked out. No.
I'm here to help. You know my help skills.
Now, can you see what I have, or can you see it? I can.
Yeah. Put it up again, please. Okay, it looks like it doesn't work from your side. Let me try from my side.
Okay.
So this is Sahih Bukhari. Remember, it is one of the reliable sources we have out there.
Well, now, Hatun, this is what Muslims claim is their most reliable source.
Yeah, so we go according to, we are going to be nice to the Muslims tonight.
Good, okay.
Okay? Because we want Muslims to hear actually what really happened to their sources and how unreliable Islam is. I'm trying to make it bigger.
Okay, what we can do, why don't we just read what you have there, and then you can scroll down as we go down.
Yeah, so if that's okay with you, we just look at it and then we comment on it, question it. And then if there are Muslims who are in the chat, please listen carefully, so it will be helpful if you can help us out on what is happening in Islamic tradition. Jay, would you like to be the reader?
Yeah, let me go ahead and read it. 510, narrated by Anas ibn Malik. Hudhaifa bin Al-Yaman came to Uthman at the time when the people of Sham, Sham would be Syria, that would include what today is Syria and much of Iraq, and also what we know as Kuwait, and also parts of what is Israel. That's all called the Sham. And the people of Iraq were waging war to conquer Arminya and Adharbijan. That's Armenia and Azerbaijan as we know today. Hudhaifa was afraid of that means the people of Sham and Iraq, the differences in the recitation of the Quran. So he said to Uthman, "O chief of the believers, save the nation before they differ about the book, as Jews and the Christians did before." So Uthman sent a message to Hafsa, the wife of Muhammad, who is the daughter of Umar, saying, "Send us the manuscripts of the Quran so that we may compile the Quranic materials in perfect copies and return the manuscripts to you." Hafsa sent it to Uthman. So this is the copy that she was given in 632 by Abu Bakr and Umar, and she kept under her bed.
Okay, let's stop there for now, because I do have a couple of basic questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Bukhari died 870, approximately 250 years after death of Muhammad.
Yeah.
So Bukhari is telling us in the time of Uthman, in the as people are fighting in Azerbaijan and Armenia. I don't know how you pronounce that in English.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Yeah. There are different recitations of the Quran. And then when we look at the Tabari account, it talks about because of that, it caused people in the war to call one another kafir, non-believers. And then this guy is concerned that now nation is gonna differ about the Quran as the Christians and then Jews differ. What's happening, Jay?
Well, it's obvious that there were a number of different Qurans, and the supposition is, since there's a numbers of different Qurans, we've got a problem here, because if these Qurans differ, as they're admitting, and it's saying there are different Qurans, so that's the problem. Then we've got to codify one specific and one model, what we would call a canonical text. So you can see the difficulty why Hudhaifa is bringing this up. And they're blaming people from Azerbaijan and Armenia, but they're also taking a look. It says also they're blaming people from Shams. Shams is actually Syria, Iraq, and also Israel and parts of what we now know as Kuwait. So that this is very much closer to home. It's not just people way off in Azerbaijan or Armenia, like I hear many Muslims claim. And he's saying that he's saying here they differ about the book. Differences in recitation of the Quran. Let's unpack that word recitation. Now, Muslims are saying, aha, so this has nothing more than to do with how you read the Quran. Recitation. This would be known as ahruf and kirat. Are you familiar with those words, Hatun?
Yes, I am, Jay.
Okay. Explain to the crowd what they mean.
Actually, it's a bit strange to explain because according to Dr. Yasir Kadir, he says, actually, we don't know what is aruf means, and we will never know. But he gives us a couple of suggestions what they might be, and overall, it is talking about the different word. Like as the tashkils are edited, it changed the sound of it.
Okay, now we can get into this, and I can explain this. I would rather that Al-Fadi were here so he could do it because he's an Arabic. Neither of us are Arab speakers. I have learned and I've studied Arabic. You haven't, but certainly I would not be an expert on Arabic. But anybody who has had any type of study on Arabic knows that in order to read a consonantal text, when you just take a look at the English that we have there up on the screen. In English, we have both consonants and we have vowels together, do we not? Written in the text.
Yeah.
So, Hudhaifa, H is a consonant. U is a vowel. So that is not a problem in English or in most of our Western languages. But in Arabic, like Hebrew, there is no vowels written in its only consonantal form. There are 28 letters. And of the 28 letters in Arabic, 22 of them need to have either dots above and below the line to distinguish one from the other. And then on top of that, after these, so only 6 of the 28 are actually unique letters. 6 of the 28 Arabic letters, consonants, are unique. The others need dots above and below to delineate the different sounds. On top of that, if you want to have the vowel sounds, the U, the A, and the E sound, you need to have vowelization. The U sound is the Dhamma, the A sound is the Fatha, and the E sound is the Kasra. Those did not exist in the 7th century. Neither did the dots above and below the lines exist in the 7th century. So when you have here a reference to recitation, this makes no sense whatsoever in a consonantal text, of which the Qurans at that time or anything written in Arabic at that time would have been. There is no difference in recitation of a consonantal text. You're looking at a bare bones, looking at the bare consonants in front of you. How you read it in your different dialect, how you read it orally, then you put in the diacritical marks. Then you put in the vowelization. You do it orally. You do it as you recite it. But you cannot do it on a written text. You cannot write it down in a written text if these vehicles did not exist, and they didn't exist in the 7th century. The diacritical marks were only created another century later, and the vowelization were introduced in the late 8th century and the early 9th century. So by the time Al-Bukhari is writing this down, that's why it's important that you wrote that you mentioned that date, Hatun. By the time Al-Bukhari is writing this down in 870, that's 240 years later, at that time, everybody knew what he was talking about because he's talking about his own period. In the late 9th century, when there were diacritical marks, when there was vowelization, when this was well known, and when there was, you could read a text differently depending on what dots were put on and what vowels especially were attached, you would read it differently. But somebody who is in Morocco will read it different than someone in Syria, will read it different than someone in Yemen, and will certainly read it different than someone in Egypt. And that's why even today in the modern world, when you go to even London, if you go to London to the Arab quarter there, just go to, what's the Arab street right there, just north of Speaker's Corner?
Edgware Road.
Sorry, say it again.
Edgware Road.
Edgware Road. Go to Edgware Road and look at just go there tomorrow or the day after. Go down and go to the Arab bookshops and look at an Arab newspaper. Even today, look at the Arab newspapers that are in print, that have been printed in Cairo. They don't have any vowelization on them. They keep off the vowelization so that anybody from Morocco or Cairo or Yemen or Syria, anywhere, could buy those newspapers and read it in their own mind orally, or speak it out in their own mind, putting their own vowelization so that the recitation is different. That makes sense today to do that, because if you do that, you will sell many more newspapers. And the same problem exists here with this reference to recitation. This makes no sense in the 7th century. That idea of difference in recitation could only make sense if you had that vowelization to make a difference in the recitation. There are no vowels in the 7th century. So this is a huge error by Bukhari. And many people, except Arabs, do not, most all the Muslims I talk to have never picked this up. They don't know how to pick it up because they don't understand Arabic. More than that, even the Arab speakers, and I'm sure there's some listening to us right now, would not know anything about this because they don't understand the history of the Arabic language, or, excuse me, the history of the Arabic script. They would not know that the Arabic script in the 7th century was so crude that it did not contain any diacritical marks, any dots above and below the line. They would not even know that vowelization was introduced at a much, much later time, about 100 to 150 years later. But it did exist at the time of Bukhari. So this would make sense only for the time of Bukhari, which is the author of this piece that we're reading right now.
Yeah. Can I just add a couple of points you made, Jay?
Yeah.
So just one of the differences, just for those of you who are watching, for you to give attention, is today, even though if you buy newspapers in Edgware Road where people in Morocco, people in Saudi Arabia can easily read, none of them reads that newspaper and come to the conclusion while intention of the newspaper was there was a car accident, 5 people died, and the Saudi Arabian person reads it and says there was a car accident, 5 people died, but Moroccan people reads that and then says, oh, there was a party where 11 people had fun. So they still, both of those people still read the same newspaper and then come to the conclusion and say, oh, there was a car accident, 5 people died. But in 7th century, according to Sahih Bukhari, as people are in the war, because of the recitation, they called one another kafir, non-believers. One person was reciting something else versus other person was reciting something else, which caused other person to be called as kafir. But so I've got a book in my hand. This is from Yasir Qadi, called An Introduction to the Science of Quran. Okay, it's very helpful book for those of you who kind of curious actually what happened. In page 172, he describes what is ahruf. Okay, he says the ahruf are the various ways that the verses of the Quran are read. Okay, according to someone. And then amazing thing happens is he goes to the page 175 and then he states true meaning of the ahruf was known only by Allah. Even today Muslim tells you ahrufs are just the different recitations because of the vowels, but Muslim scholars are telling us today, actually we will never know what it means because it is only known to the Allah. I think that's very, very sad. Very, very sad. Today they don't even know what it meant in 7th century. So that's page 175 of his book.
Hatun, can I just underline one thing?
Yes.
Remember, for those Muslims who are having a difficulty with what we're saying today, if they do not like what we're saying, then they need to help us understand, or help anybody who's an Arabist. This is why Al-Fadi is so good, because he is an Arabist. He understands intimately. It's his own language. And he comes up with this argument all the time, that when you have a written text can be read with any recitation. Recitation, by definition, is an oral speaking of what is written in the script. All right? Therefore, if you're going to destroy Qurans, or you're going to change Qurans, or you're going to create a new Quran because of different recitations, That makes no sense, because the consonantal text is the same regardless of any recitation. The recitation is only the reading of the consonants. Okay? And I think so many Muslims assume that what the ahruf in the qiraat is, regardless of what Qadri and his confusion, remember, Qadri and many of these are not native Arabs. They tend to come from the Indian subcontinent. Therefore, they do not have this problem in their own languages, in Hindi and Gujarati and Malayalam and all the rest. But when you come to Arabic, especially with Arabic, like Hebrew, the consonantal text remains constant. It's a constant text. How you then read each one of those letters, depending on whether you're from Yemen or Oman, or whether you are from Syria or even Timbuktu, where how you read each one of those letters will depend on your dialect. And the dialect you are reading those letters from will include or will impose different vowelization, the ad, u, the e, or the long ah, the dagar aleph. That will be imposed by you, either in your head or orally as you actually read it out loud. The text, however, remains the same for all of these different dialects. So a different recitation implying a different dialect does not make sense until you have at your disposal those vowelizations, those three vowels, which did not exist in the 7th century. So back to what we're reading here with Al-Bukhari, this makes no sense. And it is what we call a historical anachronism. This is a glaring historical anachronism written by Bukhari, because Al-Bukhari was not a historian. He didn't even come from that part of Arabia. He came from Bukhara. Bukhara is much further north, north of Iran. So he was not a native Arab. He would not have known about the history of the Arab language. It's obvious that an awful lot of what they're saying in the traditions in the 9th and 10th century are not historical. We're getting of that from all kinds of historical problems, even with the geography. Now, can you understand why even Al-Bukhari did not know about this historical fact, that there was no vowelizations that early? So recitations would not have made sense in a written text. Recitations only make sense in an oral reading of that text, but the oral reading would not appear on the written page. Let me repeat that. Recitations only make sense in the oral reading of the consonantal text, and they would not have appeared any difference on the consonantal written page. If that is the case, then why, and here's the question then why did Uthman need to rewrite the Quran? Why did he need to rewrite an entirely new Quran, a second Quran?
Also, let me, before we continue from the hadith, let me add another point. So Muslim would make a claim that oral tradition is very reliable. But what we read from Sahih Bukhari is telling us, actually, no, oral tradition is failed. Therefore, now we need to compile the Quran under the Uthman, because of the oral tradition, people are calling one another non-believers. Because oral tradition is failed, therefore, they need to put together the second Quran. So don't fall in that phrase that actually oral tradition is perfect, oral tradition is reliable. If it was reliable, they would not need to think, oh, they will differ regarding their Qurans as the Jews and Christians are differ. Yet Jews and Christians don't differ about the Bible. Christians use the Old Testament, Jewish people, Old Testament and New Testament. Jewish people use only Old Testament and some of the extra books.
Can I take that one step further, Hatun? If you want to say that oral tradition is sacrosanct and is so good, go with what Hatun is saying, that why then do you need to write a second Quran? Secondly, if it was so good, if oral tradition was so good, and there are differences in ahruf and qira'at, how can you even suggest that this would show up on any written text? Again, getting back to the earlier point. And secondly, not only does this suggest that oral tradition is inept and not and not a foolproof method. It also suggests that even those in the caliphal courts, including Abu Bakr, including Umar, including Uthman, realized that the written text is the most solid text. The written text is the only thing, is the only guarantee that those people, what they were memorizing and what they were orally speaking was correct, which is a no-brainer today. We know that today. Then why is it Muslims are still disputing that? Why is it? Remember, Hatun, when we were on the ladder last month in June, remember when you didn't see this, but when Mansour got off the ladder, after he got off after 30 minutes, his first, if you look on his video, he goes right over to some people off to our left, and he says clearly to them, who cares about this? Who even cares about these differences? We had it memorized. And it's the memorization that's the strongest form of proof. And my question to him is, what did they memorize? And if they memorized it, which recitation did they memorize? But more than that, remember the story and that you're bringing up about the person that memorized it one way and the other man memorized it another way, and he grabbed him by the collar of the neck and he dragged him before Muhammad, and he says, this man has memorized it. Say again?
That's the Surah 25, story of the Surah 25.
Surah 25, he grabs him by the neck, he brings it before Muhammad. Muhammad listens to both recitation, and he says both are correct. That was not a written text. They were speaking it out loud. Okay? There's the problem. Can you see? No one is saying there in that story that this man wrote it one way and this man wrote it another way, and Muhammad looked at both writings and said both are correct. That has nothing to do with the written text. That was to do with the dialectical differences. A dialect are what we have in every language. We have many different dialects of English. We have dialects of Turkish, have dialects of Arabic. That exists as people change words and change phrases, have different idiomatic expressions in many different locales of a given language. And the same exists in Arabic. That's why when he said that, and if that is a true story in Surah 25, he is referring to the way it was read, the way it was spoken, not the written text. Because remember, nothing was written down that early. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Muhammad hadn't written it down. So Muslims, be careful what Muhammad is saying, even if it is true. Let's just say it is true. What Muhammad is saying is the way you recite it, the way you speak it out with your different dialects, each dialect is correct. But the written part, that had not even existed when he made that comment.
But let me just bring attention to that hadith. So while two people are fighting for the recitation of the Surah 25, when both of them goes to Muhammad, by that time, Muhammad never ever bothered to share with anyone, guys, beware, Allah is giving me the same chapter in different versions. Just beware of it. So by that time, like, man who's supposed to be the example to all mankind doesn't even give that information until people about to fight with one another about it. And today, I love to see actually what was there that those two people were fighting for, because fighting wasn't simply calling something he versus we. Fighting was about, like, this guy very much bothered the way recitation was taking place. So trusting oral tradition at the time of Muhammad is very, very bad. You cannot trust oral tradition at the time of Muhammad. We couldn't trust oral tradition according to Sahih Bukhari at the time of Abu Bakr. Therefore, they needed to put it down. And we are in 650s, and we cannot trust oral tradition at the time of Uthman, because people are fighting because of the oral tradition. So that's not that perfect oral tradition. Don't fall in the traps of Muslims when that they tell you, oh, it was all perfect. If it was so perfect, Islamic tradition wouldn't give us those informations.
Now, Bart Connolly is asking, hold on a minute. These two men that were brought before Muhammad, they were both from Mecca. Therefore, did they not speak the same dialect? And the answer is no. No, they did not speak the same dialect. There were many dialectical differences. Remember, even as we're going to see now later on with Uthman, they refer to the Quraishi dialect. We're going to get to this Quraishi dialect. So there are dialectical differences in the 7th century. No one disputes that. But there's no written text that is dialectical difference.
I think I'm gonna disagree with you on that, even though those people are from the same group, Jay. Therefore, I would have the view, actually, no, they shouldn't have any issue hearing the same way from Muhammad. But it is the same people group. Muhammad gives them two different versions. I think I am disagreeing with you on that, but okay, that's a big deal.
So I stand accused, but let me just give you an example. You say potato, we say potato. You say tomato, we say tomato. Even in English, we have different dialectical differences between Americans and English. We speak the same language, but the pronunciation would be different. And I'm assuming that there were differences in Mecca from different outlying tribes because of people going through. And that though the same word would be said, potato would be by some, others would say potato, it's still the same word. And I'm guessing that this is why the two are saying that. Nonetheless, if they were from the same dialect, then you still have the same problem. The fact that Muhammad agreed and said both are correct, what is he referring to then? Both what are correct?
No, I think the issue was, so because they are like two people are proper British, okay? They all brought up in London. They speak the same language in the same way, okay? What Muhammad did was give Surah 25 to person A differently, and then give the Surah 25 to person B differently. That was the cause, the problem. But both those people were from the London. They were all from the same people group. Yes, there were different groups, and today we know what were those groups. And Uthman says Quran is revealed in the Quraishi dialect. I think there is an issue with Muhammad dealing with those two different people group, but that's all different topic. I think we will just disagree on this. I would blame Muhammad for giving the same people group in the different version of the Quran.
Okay, now let's continue on with Sahih Bukhari, volume 4, hadith number 510. You want to put that back up there again?
Oh, is it not there?
No, you're there.
Okay, just a moment. Okay, we are continuing with the Sahih Bukhari. And those of you who have a question on the topic, please put @ in front of the DCCI ministries, and hopefully that will get my attention or Jay's attention. Jay, are you happy to continue to read it for us?
Yeah, now some are jumping ahead, and the people who are sending questions are actually jumping ahead to what we haven't read yet. So let's go ahead and read what we have here. If you read on the screen, so I think you've gone down too far. Go back up just a little bit. No, I'm sorry. You got it right. So you have there with Hafsa. Hafsa sent to Uthman. Uthman then ordered Zaid ibn Thabit. Now remember, Zaid ibn Thabit is the same secretary of Muhammad who wrote the first Quran at the time of 632 under the authority of Abu Bakr and Umar. So this is the same character, the same guy who wrote the first Quran 20 years earlier. So he sends for the secretary of Muhammad, Zaid ibn Thabit, along with 3 others, Abdullah bin AzZubair, Sa'id bin Al-As, and AbdurRahman bin Harith bin Hisham. Long name. So let's just call them Zubair, Al-As, and Hisham. They are 3 of them who have been given to Zaid ibn Thabit to put, the 4 of them are to put the Quran 8 together a second time. Now stop there, right there. Hold on a minute. Why? Well, let's just read the very next verse. After he goes and presents these, to rewrite the manuscript in perfect copies. And then Uthman says to the 3 Quraishi men, in case you disagree with Zaid ibn Thabit on any point in the Quran, then write it in the dialect of Quraish, as the Quran was revealed in their tongue. Here again, here's a real problem, because you have these three men who are Quraishi, and that they may disagree with Zaid ibn Thabit. How can you have a written disagreement from a dialectical standpoint? Again, this is the exact same problem that we saw earlier with the recitation. And this is why it's important to look and see how the Quran evolved historically, how the Arabic evolved. I'm sorry, not the Quran, the Arabic evolved historically. That's why today, in the 20th century, in the 21st century, we know how the Arabic evolved. Men like Dr. François Doroche is the world authority on this. Men like Dr. Gerd Quinn, Dr. von Bothmer, Dr. Oleg, the German scholars. They are the ones who have given us the best historical overview of how the Arabic evolved. And remember, the Arabic that was existing in the 7th century is a derivative of the Nabatean language and the Nabatean script. The Nabatean script are the script that was used much further north, up in Petra, up in what we would call today southern Jordan, the country of Jordan, and northern Arabia, places like Medina Saleh and places like Petra. That was where the Nabatean language became, and the Nabatean script was well used. The Arabic script comes out of that. It is a derivative of the Nabatean script. So at that time, because it was so crude, there was no way of looking and writing a dialectical difference. The Quraishi dialect is a dialect. So there you have reference to a separate dialect called the Quraishi dialect from the people who are the Quraishi men. That's Alas, Zubair, and Hisham. They are all Quraishi. And they, in case they disagree, well, if they're already Quraishi, why would they disagree since they're all the same dialect? That's a curiosity. But if they disagree with Zaid ibn Thabit, then they're to write it in their Quraishi dialect. If they're going to disagree, that means they're going to disagree by writing it. But see, how can you write a dialectical difference? And Muslims, help me here. How can you write a dialectical difference in a consonantal text if you have no vowelization? And at that time, you didn't even have diacritical marks. And I've been asking that. I think it's going on 20 years, and I've yet to see anybody. Yusuf Qardari doesn't deal with this. Ijaz Ahmad doesn't deal with this. Shabir Ali didn't deal with this. And it seems like those who are not native Arab speakers, I am not an Arab native speaker. Al-Fadi is, and that's why Al-Fadi is so good, because he's asking this. You cannot have this problem. You cannot even have a disagreement this early. There cannot be a dialectical disagreement in a consonantal Arabic text in the mid-7th century, 652. This just did not exist that early on. So that's why I'm asking Muslims again, explain this to me. This makes no sense unless, of course, you look and see who's writing this down. This is Al-Bukhari writing it down way later, 240 years later. We're talking about the late 9th century. He's redacting it back to what he thought was a problem in the 7th century, and he didn't realize that this makes no sense, because he didn't know his history. He didn't know how the Arabic history existed, because he's not an Arabist himself. So let's continue on. Anything more you want to say on that?
No, I just wanted to add something you said. If we think more practically, okay, Quran is the eternal word of Allah, revealed to man called Muhammad. And now, Uthman, who never met with Allah, who never met with the Gabriel, goes against Muhammad, where Muhammad says, oh, Quran is revealed to me in several different ways, goes against Muhammad and then makes a decision. From now on, eternal word of Allah is going to be in the Quraish dialect. There is a problem with that, because according to Islamic traditions, on the day of judgment, when Quran intici, surah is intici for you, it is the correct recitation is going to intici for you. If the dialects, as Muslim says, just the recitations, then there is a problem. There is an eternal problem Muslims have, because today, if you are reciting the wrong recitation, today, if you are reciting the wrong dialect, that chapter is not going to intercede for you on the day of judgment. That's the first point. Second point is, why on earth man who never spent time with Allah, man who never met with the Gabriel, finds authority to go against the teachings of Muhammad and then makes the Quran in one way. That I think those would be my basic questions to the Muslims. Because according to Islamic tradition, Allah gives Quran in several different ways to make life easy to the Muslims. But in somehow, Uthman steps in and then says, actually, no, maybe Allah taught that, but now we see there is a problem. I'm going to fix that. How do I fix that? We write the Quran in dialect of Quraish, one dialect for everyone. That will fix the problem.
Well done, Hatun. I like that. I love the way you're kind of bringing it back and showing how idiotic this is. Let me just refer to a few comments that are coming up. Kafir Linda Clark, good to see you again, Linda. Glad to see you're on board again. You're always a stalwart. It's always great to have you. Your name pops up everywhere, and you really are a real warrior for Christ. You say, how can you write a dialect without vowels? Exactly. So you're getting it. I hope others are getting it like Linda is. If Linda can get it, and she's an American living here in America, and I doubt, Linda, you've ever taken Arabic. If you can get that, I hope everybody can get that point. Bart Connolly continues on, and he says, exactly how could they disagree? That means Zubair, Alas, Hisham, and Zaid ibn Thabit. How could they disagree if they all were Quraishi? And how could Omar disagree on the harf of if he spoke Quraishi and the other guy also spoke it and recited in it? Exactly. You're getting it, Bart Connie. It's great to see these comments. You guys are picking up the problems here. That's the question you need to ask Muslims. And Bart, can you see? You've nailed it on the head. How can you have four different men? Three of them are Quraishi. Well, what is Zaid ibn Thabit? He's also Quraishi. That's why he lived. He's also belongs to the same tribe. If they all are saying or all come from the same dialect, then how can you have disagreement? And then why is it Uthman then says to write it in the very dialect that they come from? There would be no disagreement. So obviously you can see there's an awful lot of problems here. You're picking this up. Good for you. God bless you. I'm so glad that you're picking up stuff that I hadn't even seen concerning that one aspect. But thank you for your comments. This is great because you are understanding what we're saying. I hope the Muslims who are following can also understand what we're saying.
Do we have any Muslim who is making comment on it, Jay? Are you able to see them?
I can't see any here.
Okay.
That's of note. What they're doing is they're to be fair, I've not been following it that strictly because I've been having a good talk with you. But so far, if any of you comment, can you start answering these questions? There is an ex-Muslim, and he's talking about the satanic verses. An awful lot of good stuff by Bart Connolly. There's good stuff that's coming down. A lot of good people are speaking. I don't see any Muslims that, and if any of you, if you can see, tell me if I'm wrong, let me know, because I haven't been looking. Okay, there is a guy named Wam Ali, but he's just talking about DCCI, that you were destroyed by a guy named Shamsi at Speaker's Corner. So this has nothing to do with the topic.
Oh.
Let's go on. Phil Horara also has some great comments here. Go ahead.
Let's continue.
Okay, let's continue on. So once he had written this out, Zaid ibn Thabit, along with the three others, had written it out in the Quraishi dialect, which makes no sense at all. Then he had written many copies, so many copies were written.
Jay, just a moment. Did you make the point? Maybe I missed it. That Zaid bin Thabit is not simply using Hafsa's Quran, or he's not simply just remembering what he wrote previously. He's just rewriting it. Did you make that point?
That we're going to make at the end, because that comes at the very bottom. Can we wait till we get to Qhuzaima ibn Thabit? Because that's where we need to bring that in. Okay?
Sorry. Continue.
Let's continue on. So once they had done so, they, meaning the four of them, had done what Uthman had asked them, had written it out in a dialect that doesn't make sense because you can't write it in a dialect. Nonetheless, once they had done that, they then Uthman then returned the original manuscripts to Hafsa. So she got her original manuscripts back.
Yeah.
Uthman then sent to every Muslim province one copy of what they had copied. Okay? Let's talk about that for a while.
So I remember there was a you were on the ladder and one of the Dawa members came. As you were saying, you were saying Uthman sent 4 copies to four cities, and Muslim was challenging you after you've been saying that for 20 years. Muslim decided to challenge your claim after 20 years.
Actually, that was Mansur.
Yeah. To give him the reference, where did you get that 4 cities? Because I think in his mind, actually, there are more cities.
I'm going to share with you this slide. Can you put this slide up?
Just a moment. Yes.
I'm going to share with you this slide. Now I'm coming up on my own. Can you put this slide up?
Did you put the...
I'm going to share with you. It's a map. Can you put this map up? Now I'm coming up on my own. Can you put this slide up?
Jay, is your computer on?
I'm going to share with you. It's a map. Can you put this map up? Now I'm coming up on my own. Can you put this slide up?
Jay, is your computer on? Jay, is your computer on?
It's just repeating itself. Sorry.
No, it's not repeating because you say something. No, is your internet, is your YouTube channel on?
It's just repeating itself. Sorry. Say that one more time.
Is your YouTube channel on?
My YouTube channel is, but there is no reference. There is no. I've turned off all the volume.
Okay, it's gone now, but we had that volume. Okay. So,
what I want to do is I want to share this with you.
Okay. Put on the screen.
Okay. Oops, what happened to you?
Yeah. Put on the screen.
It's on. Is it on the screen? Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to do this. Put it back on again.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going to. All right, it's not going to. I got a full screen, but on yours it's not full screen. But I want you to look at those black circles. Those black circles are the provinces, and we were on the ladder, were we not, Hatun? And you looked it up as to how many cities were there. And how many cities did you come up with?
No, it's not. I looked up how many cities were there. When Muslim kind of said that, I was just like, oh, Jay has been saying this for 20 years. Why Muslims are challenging this now, not like when you first started. So, and then I start kind of looking at it, how many cities, like how many copies were made, how many copies went to the different cities. What we saw is Islamic tradition tells us, some of the people, some people are saying actually no, they were 5 copies and then 1 kept in Mecca. Another group is saying no, actually, for example, Suyuti talks about there were 5 copies and then 1 kept in Mecca. Someone else says there were 6 copies, Uthman's personal copies, and then different and 1 different from Medina. And then another group says no, actually, there were 7 copies, and then it goes on. In Yasir Qadi talks about in his book, like actually we don't know how many copies were made, but he gives us the references for 9 different copies.
So 9 different copies to 9 different provinces.
Yeah, but it's not only 9 different copies. With each copy, 1 person goes. Okay, so I've got the book. I take the book with me, and I'm someone who knows how to recite this book, who know the book. I go with the book so that people don't mess up anymore.
Exactly. Now let's look at that map again. Those are the 9 cities. Let's name them. Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden, Nishapur, and Herat. So here you have Basra and Baghdad, which are in Iraq today, Damascus, which is in Syria, Jerusalem, which is in Israel, Alexandria and Cairo, which are in Egypt, Aden, which is in Yemen, Nishapur, which is in Iran, and Herat, which would be in Afghanistan. Those are the 9 provinces. And it does say here in Al-Bukhari that these are 9 provinces. Am I correct? Sent it off to every province.
Every province, yeah.
So in 652, there were not 4 provinces. There were not 4 Qurans. There were not 4 copies. There were 9 provinces, which means there had to be 9 copies. That means there had to be 9 people that went with each one of these copies to each one of those provinces, which were controlled by those cities. Are you following me there?
Yes.
So we asked that at the time when this came up. And I said, well, this is a miracle. I had no idea. I've always been taught in all my training in when I did my master's at Fuller, when I was there at School of Oriental African Studies, I had always been taught by Gerald Hotting and Dr. Gerald Hotting and all the scholars that there were only 4 copies made by Uthman: Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, and Medina. But it looks like there were 9, and I would also say a 10th. The 10th one would be the Medinan one. Because remember, you have this happening. This is happening in Medina because Uthman did not live in Damascus. It was Muawiyah in the Umayyads who moved to Damascus in 661, another 10 years later. So the headquarters for the Arabs at this time was certainly in Medina. So that one would have been retained in Medina, and the other 9 would be to the other provinces. So what does that say, Hatun, about the Quran at that early?
So guy called Abu Hatim Sijistani, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but like he died in 869. He puts Medina in the list as one of the city which Quran has been sent. Like for me, doesn't matter how many cities gone or which cities. The thing is like today we don't have any of them. That's the miracle of Islam.
So you're telling me, and this is true, there is not one of those 9 copies that's in existence today.
I'm not only telling, I'm also editing on that. Actually, Muslims don't even have one view on which cities those Qurans have been sent. And we did a couple of years ago or last year, we looked at the reliability of the Sahih Bukhari at Speaker's Corner. And we can see like, he's not clear where has it been sent. In 1400s, people steps in 1300s and then tells us, oh, those might be our options. But it is sad today we don't have any of them.
Now, Hatun, stop and think. When you look and you ask Muslims of those 9 cities, take a look at those 9 cities, and every one of those 9 cities, except for Jerusalem, is still in Muslim hands. That means Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Alexandria, Cairo, Aden, Herat, and Nishapur, 8 of them are still in Muslim hands. They have always been in Muslim hands for 1400 years. Am I correct?
Yeah. And
also, we don't know of any catastrophe that has happened to those 8 cities. We know of no floods that have happened. There have been no earthquakes. There have been no conquests. There would be no reason why those 8 should still not be in existence today. And of course, Jerusalem as well. So let's say a 9th. There's nothing that we can see in the history of the last 1400 years that would suggest that there would be any reason or any means by which those 9 could have been destroyed or disappeared. Correct?
That I think that's the similar argument Tayyar Altınkılıç says. We don't know, like there is nothing recorded in history as there was a big fire or earthquake, something happened, but today we don't have those Qurans.
Because I've heard Muslims come back to me on that and says, listen, 1400 years, there's lots of room for destruction, for water damage, floods, there could be earthquakes, all kinds of things could have happened to destroy the manuscripts. That's why we have no original manuscripts. Remember, there's not one original manuscript. None of these 9 exist today, not one. And we're getting this from the Muslims themselves. In fact, I don't know of any Muslim that would claim that that Uthmanic recension, this is what we're talking about, the second Quran, the Uthmanic recension still exists today. When they wrote their writings in 2007, I got a hold of them in 2013, they made it clear that the Topkapi, the Samarkand, any one of these earliest Quranic manuscripts, the Husayni, the Ma'il, the Petropolitanus, and the Sana manuscript, none of those 6 major manuscripts are Uthmanic. And they even said they're not even copies of the Uthmanic manuscript. So they made it very clear that no Uthmanic manuscript, none of these second Quran, the one that we're talking about today, the one we're reading about in Al-Bukhari, volume 6, 510, none of those manuscripts that Uthman commissioned Zaid ibn Thabit to make and sent off to 9 provinces, not one of them is in existence today. Now, that begs a huge question.
Just let me add something on it. Even though we are talking about in a book form of it, but remember before Uthman, in the time of Abu Bakr, when Zaid bin Thabit was compiling the Quran, there were writings written on the bones, on the animal skins. We don't even have them. Like, those supposed to be like so important to you, should be able to look after them, but we don't even have them. But those are the general questions anyway.
Those are hugely significant. And I've always asked this. Remember when we were on the ladder with Mansour, we asked him, is there one Quran at all? Can you show us one Quran, even a partial Quran from the time of Uthman, say 50%. I would like to get 100%. I would like to get one Quran with 114 surahs that's exactly like this Quran right here, the Hafs Quran, this one that we're using today, a one that is exactly like this. I would love if any Muslim could provide me one from the time of Uthman and prove it's from the time of Uthman. Don't just claim it's from the time of Uthman. I remember many years ago, Hatun, before you came to Speaker's Corner, I had been down at Speaker's Corner for many years. I was at Speaker's Corner for about 25 years, from 1992 up until 2017. And many years ago, I remember the Muslims down at Speaker's Corner in the 1990s were claiming about 100,000 Qurans existed today that were from the time of Uthman, that they had access to. And I remember asking then in the 1990s, can you even show me one of them, of these 100,000? You claim there's 100,000, where are they? After 9/11, then it was reduced to around 10,000. They said, yeah, we have 10,000 Qurans. I remember Adnan Rashid. Remember your good friend Adnan Rashid?
Yeah, we are very good friends.
He did a debate with me. And in the debate, a formal debate there in Britain, he claimed that there were 100 Qurans that he could name, 100 Qurans that existed from the time of Uthman. In fact, he even claimed that he had one in his possession, that he owned one of these 100 Qurans, and that he would bring it down with and show me these 100 Qurans. One of the 100 Qurans. Then they stopped saying that after around 2010, especially after 2014. By 2013, by 2014, they reduced it to 6 Qurans. And remember, those 6 Qurans were the ones that I took and I introduced. Well, I didn't introduce them. I just referred to them in my debate with Dr. Shabir Ali in 2014. And those are the 6 I just talked about: the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, the Husayni, the Petropolitanus, and the Sana manuscript. Those 6 Qurans we introduced 5 years ago. So they came down to 6 Qurans. And those are the 6 Qurans that they were claiming were from Uthman. Al-Takulich and Ismail destroyed that. François de Roche, all of the great scholars no longer consider those are Uthmanic. And now they're dating them. And the dates do not come from the time of Uthman. Then came up this reference in 2015 that there was one Quran, the Birmingham Folio. Remember the Birmingham Folio?
Yeah, the one which was appeared before time of Muhammad.
That's right. It was dated from 568 to 645. Muhammad lived from 570 to 632. So it encompasses the life of Muhammad. And all the Muslims wanted to go to the last date, the furthest date. The one, I'm sorry, on your side, the furthest date over here. They wanted to go to the furthest date, the one that was 645. But even 645, notice that there's a problem there. Because even if you go to that latest date, 645, the problem with that is 7 years before the Quran was finally compiled by Uthman. 7 years before what we're reading about today. This could not have existed. Uthman had not yet had Zaid ibn Thabit Al-Ansari and Hisham write the Quran. The Quran still was not written down. So how can you have these folios that were dated by carbon dating? By carbon dating, remember, carbon dating is very inexact. But these two folios, they're only two pieces of paper is all they are. Just the front and back of two pieces of paper. That's all they are. No more than what I have in my hand here. Just two pieces of paper. That's all they are. Just two pieces. And yet these are dated 645 at the latest date, 645. When you look at what's inside those two folios, you will see that they include Surah 18, Surah 19, and Surah 20. All those three are stories that are borrowed. Am I correct, Hatun?
Yeah. But let's not look at them, but we will go to them like in coming live stream, if that's okay.
And that's all we need to say about that now. But let's just say, can you see because this did come up on the questions. So I'm going to say, what about the Birmingham folio? The Birmingham folio has been disputed, has been destroyed. And in fact, scholars today are not going to the Birmingham folio anymore for that very reason. It does not fit the Islamic narrative, but also, as you just intimated, it does not fit the radiocarbon dating. If you want to go to radiocarbon, wait till we do unpack the radiocarbon dating. We're going to show you many more laboratories, much more reputable, or as reputable as the Oxford laboratory, that predate the Quran to the 4th and 5th century. Hold on, because that's before Muhammad, that's before the Quran, that's before even Islam. But that's for another time, another discussion at another date. Now let's get back to chapter 6, verse 510.
Yeah, so I remember when in my early days at Speaker's Corner, like I had the similar claims from Muslims. So they had the Quran from time of Muhammad. As the time went on, they had the Quran from the time of Uthman. As the time went on, we have Quran, perfect Quran, dot by dot, letter by letter. There is only one Quran. And now they moved on from that. Like it's just like as the time goes on, as they look at their Islamic tradition and compare that with the history, they come to the conclusion, actually, nope, Quran is not that much reliable at all. But anyway, shall we continue from the hadith?
Okay, because then they made one more claim last month. When I was with you on the ladder, what did Mansur claim? Remember, we pushed him and we pushed him. What did he finally claim as what they have for the Quran by 721?
It's just getting out of the control, those ones.
Do you remember what Mansur said a month ago?
Remind me.
He said that by the 1st century AH, which goes from 622 to 719, we have 96% of the Quran. 96% of the Quran. He finally admitted that they did not have 100% of the Quran even within the 1st century. Now, that's a huge admission, but he did not explain where he got that figure 96% from.
No worries. I've got them all worked out. I've got them like with the surahs, which one is missing, with the variations. We can look at them as time comes.
We're going to do that. We're going to do that yet. I don't want to bring it up yet because there's an enormous amount of problems with that 96%. Wait till you find, those of you who are watching, wait till you find what Hatun has found and what we have found. And what we're going to do is we're going to unpack that. That'll be a whole live stream that we can do on its own. It'll be a standalone. But when you look and see what this 96% of the Quran means, well, this is going to be fun. And we're going to have to confront Mansur with this because I would like to see if he's even aware of what that 96% is. Now, let's get back to Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, 510.
Okay, so do you remember where you stopped?
Yeah, go ahead, put it up on the screen. I'll read it from here.
Are you able to see it?
I can't see it yet. Now I can see it. Okay. So he ordered that all the other Quranic branches, which are written, now he sends it one to every province, one copy that they had copied. Now comes a real devastating part. And then, who's this? He, Uthman, ordered that all the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, be burnt. Okay, Uthman.
So
I'm sorry.
last year, there was a guy from Saudi Arabia. I think it was first time he was passing through Speaker's Corner. He was so disappointed that woman who is not covering, holding the Quran. And then when he noticed I underlined the Quran, he just lost it. He said he was going to chop my head off. But Uthman burned all the Qurans. He ordered them to be burned. No one ever turned to Uthman and then said, "What are you doing?"
Now notice,
sad.
he burnt what? He burnt not just fragmentary manuscripts, he burnt whole copies. That means entire Qurans he burnt. Now, Hatun, why do you burn entire Qurans?
Well, you want to hide something, so you don't want any evidence.
Absolutely. The only reason I can think of burning anything is to destroy the evidence.
Yeah, that's if you kill someone, you want to hide the evidence that you killed that person, so you will like get rid of all the evidence. That's what he did.
Exactly.
Very logical.
That's something that Muslims do. Do we do that as Christians?
Christians were burned because of their scripture versus Muslims burned their scripture. That's the differences we have.
Now, let me ask you, Hatun, in the history of Christianity in the last 2,000 years, do you know of any record where Christians have burned the Bible?
As I told, they got burned because they were holding the Bible.
There is no record of Christians burning Bibles. There is a record in 300 AD, the Edict of Diocletian, the emperor at that time, he had Bibles burned, but that was a Roman emperor. That was not Christians who were burning the Bibles. That was uniquely a Roman emperor who was destroying the Bibles. Nowhere in the history of Christianity in the last 2,000 years do I have any record of what we see, what we're reading right here, that Uthman did. Whether this happened or not, what is fascinating is that it's odd that all these other fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies be burnt, which means there were written copies. If, in other words, you have copies, these have to be written Qurans. This is not oral tradition. These were written copies that existed there in Medina in the courts of Uthman that disagreed with this final copy, this second Quran written by Zaid bin Thabit and the three others, AzZubair and Hisham. So here you have the four have written down the final copy. He takes all the other ones that disagree with it and burns them. If that's not a sign of guilt, I don't know what is.
So Muslims are making history that they are the only ones who burned their own scripture. I wonder what Muhammad would say to him. But
well, here you have a man named, I'm just reading one of those comments. Sarfaraz Ansari says that Quran burning story is made up. I don't know how you can say that, Ansari, because I'm looking at your own material. We're not making this up. We're not reading something ex nihilo. This is Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 6, 5, 10. This is repeated in other sources. This is your own sources. This is not a Christian source. This is not a non-Muslim source. This is the best that you can get. You can't get anything better than Sahih Bukhari. Sahih means exactly that it has no error. The fact that he is saying this, the fact that he is writing this, the fact that he had no problem with this supports the notion that this is quite acceptable in a Islamic context.
And this is what happens as Muslims read their hadith, as when they are not happy what it says, they do their best to discredit it. But you don't have any other option. You have to go with it. If you want to practice Islam, you have to go with it. And your Islamic tradition tells you that's what Uthman ordered for Muslims to do it. And probably they did it since he was caliph. What happens when you don't obey the caliph?
It looks like Sarfaraz Ansari is disputing everything we're saying today because he says we're just making this up.
In that case, can I just encourage him to bring us something written before this discredits this account?
If he could, and I would back that up, if any Muslim can find something earlier than Al-Bukhari, bring it back to us. Go to Ibn Hisham, see what he says about the Quran. Go to Al-Waqidi. They do predate Al-Bukhari, but they don't talk about this Quran. They don't refer to this event. The first we see written about this event is with Al-Bukhari. That's why we're using it. We can't get anything earlier. And as historians, Hatun, you and I, as historians, we always, always, always have to go to that which is closest to the event. We do not take hearsay. I will not take what Ansari is coming up with. If Ansari has something better, as Safar al-Ansari, then for heaven's sakes, provide it. Don't just say it's all made up and that we're making it up. None of this we're making up. We wouldn't have the audacity to do something like this, and it would not be. Not only would it be crude and rude, it would be deceitful for us to make this up.
Oh well, last time when I checked, I wasn't able to speak Arabic. I can recite Arabic, but I wasn't able to speak Arabic, let alone write Arabic. Beside that, I don't have any time to deal with those things. I've got like life going on out there. And last time when I checked, Sahih Bukhari wasn't my father, or Sahih Bukhari wasn't J. Smith. Sahih Bukhari is a Muslim who wrote it down for sake of the Muslims 250 years after death of Muhammad. And he never even met with Muhammad. He never even met with Uthman. He never even met with Zaid bin Thabit. This is what you have. If you are going to put Sahih Bukhari under the bus, then you can, how you are going to practice your Islam? How do you know when are you going to do ghusl? How do you know when are you going to do wudu? Those things are practical things. So without Sahih Bukhari, Islam wouldn't be exist. But that's a different topic.
Now, there are two other comments I just want to refer to. James Hall is saying that interesting that modern Muslims are quite willing to discredit their own sources in order to keep a certain narrative going. And I think you're right, James Hall. I think this is what we're seeing here with this Ansari fellow. It looks like he doesn't like what he's hearing. He doesn't like what we're reading. He doesn't like the ramifications of what this says concerning his own Quran. So he's trying to discredit Al-Bukhari. I feel sorry for Ansari because there's no other place you can go to. If you don't want to go to Al-Bukhari, who else are you going to go to? You have no one then that explains how the Quran was put together. So either you can accept him or dismiss him. Then you come on down here. Let me just read this other thing. Sahih Muslim 83310. Sahih Muslim, you've been writing a number of comments through the day. Thank you for these. He asked me, can you explain about the Quranic manuscripts which were sunk in the Nile? This is the other problem. In the chapter of volume 6, 510 by Al-Bukhari, we find that Uthman burns the Quran. When we come to the Hafs manuscript at the time of 1924, and you have the references, and you have the difficulty with certainly with the Qurans that are appearing there in Cairo. When Muhammad ibn al-Haddad was the one that was given responsibility to actually choose this text, to choose the Hafs text. All the other ones that disagreed with this is in 1924 just in Cairo. All the other scripts that Hatun has. Now, what are you up to, 32 of them?
Yeah, I do have 32.
And you have them right there in your room there. The 32 that she has, all of those were taken, not hers, but the ones that existed there in Cairo, were taken out into a boat and sunk in the Nile. So here you have another case where even in modern days, not even 100 years ago, another authority, in this case, it was the Egyptian authorities there in Cairo, to get rid of the other Qurans that disagreed with the Hafs text, they had to sink them in the Nile. So you have both burning and sinking. When Muslims don't like a Quran, they either burn them or they sink them, which is fascinating to me because when this idiotic pastor here in the United States wanted to burn the Quran, and he went ahead and burned the Quran. Remember that guy in Florida a number of years ago? And he burned the Quran in public. There were riots all over the Muslim world. And I understand that 17 people lost their lives, Muslims, rioting against other Muslims, all because of what he did. And I questioned that. I remember going down to Speaker's Corner the very next Sunday, getting up on the ladder. And I held the Quran. I don't know if it probably wasn't this one. It was another one, a green one, an earlier one that I had. And I asked somebody for a cigarette lighter. And someone handed me a cigarette lighter. And then I put the cigarette lighter underneath the Quran. And I said to the crowd that was there, what are you going to do to me if I burn this Quran? Now, I was very careful not to burn the Quran. I held it far enough below that it would not damage it. And the Muslims that were there said, if you do that, we will kill you. So I asked them, is there any Muslim here who will not kill me? And no one raised their hands. That's all I needed to say. That's all I needed to do. From that experience, I could see that this whole idea of desecrating the Quran, of mimicking the Quran, of mocking the Quran, of, in this case, even destroying the Quran, like this pastor did in Florida, is so emotive for Muslims that they are willing to kill people if they destroy a Quran. And yet they're not looking in their own traditions. They're not even going back to Al-Bukhari. But this is exactly what Al-Bukhari did. He destroyed whole Qurans, not just fragmentary, as we read. These are also whole Qurans that he destroyed. And if Al-Bukhari did that back 1400 years ago, according to your tradition, not Al-Bukhari, Uthman. If Uthman did that, according to Al-Bukhari, 1400 years ago, then why are Muslims getting so upset if a pastor who is a nobody in Florida burns just one Quran? I remember taking my Bible in the same day, and I held my Bible up. And I said, you know, folks, you can burn this Bible right now, and I'm not going to do a thing to you. You can burn all the Bibles, and I will not do a thing to you. You cannot destroy the Bible by simply burning it. This is nothing more than a book with ink written on it, published here in modern days. I would rather you didn't burn the Bible, because it's great that we do have the Bibles, and I'm glad we have them in 2,500 languages, and that's why we translate them so everybody can read them. But the Bible is not a sacrosanct. The book itself is not something that we hold up like an idol, like you do with your Quran. You almost idolize and have almost made this an idol, you Muslims. And that's why when that pastor did this, however stupid he was, the fact that he did that caused you so much anger all over the Muslim world. 17 people lost their lives. Suggests to me that you have made this into an idol. And yet take a look and see how this book was put together. For heaven's sakes, this book was put together by men. If there's nothing that you can take away from today, from what we're reading here in Al-Bukhari, it looks like that Abu Bakr, a man, was the one that commissioned Zaid ibn Thabit, a man, to write this book. Neither of them are Muhammad. Muhammad was no longer living when this book was first written down in 632. That was given to Hafsa, a woman. She was given the responsibility to keep it under her bed, to maintain its integrity for 20 years. 20 years later, at the time of Uthman, another man named Uthman, who was also married to two of Muhammad's daughters, he is the third caliph. He then orders that copy that had been preserved by a woman, remember, not by God, but by a woman, to take that copy out, and told the same guy, a man, along with 3 other men, to rewrite the book that had already been written again. And if they have any discussion, they were to write it in a certain dialect. A dialect is a human language. This is a human language. This is not God's language. This is a human language. As difficult as that is in the 7th century to do, nonetheless, can you see, this is man's foot imprints all the way through. Everything worth reading about, everything we've talked about today has to do with man. And then this man, Uthman, takes all the other ones written by men that disagreed with this, well, not this one, the one that Uthman now had commissioned, the canonical text, not this one, not this one. He then burned them, destroyed them. Why? Because they were just written by men. They were not a preserved text. This was not something that was spiritual. This has nothing to do with the eternal tablet. This has nothing to do with chapter 85, verse 22. This is nothing more than many different texts, many different Qurans, partial ones and whole ones. He just burned, put them up in smoke, because that's what you can do with man-made texts. And then he took this one, the last one that he had Zaid ibn Thabit write, and he copied it into 9 copies and sent it into 9 provinces. Why? Because it was a man-made text, and everything we're seeing today comes from man's perspective. Can you see, Muslims? Therefore, you're going to have to start downgrading your elevation for the Quran. You Muslims have elevated the Quran over and over again. You are the ones that have said that this Quran is eternal. You're the ones that are telling me that, according to chapter 85, verse 22, that this Quran has never been created. This Quran is eternal, co-eternal with God. That's a duality. You try to figure that out and try to defend that. I don't know. I don't even want to get into that question. But this has always been there in heaven, eternally, sent down over a period of 22 years via the angel Gabriel to a man named Muhammad who couldn't even read and write. Why would he choose a man who couldn't even read and write? Nonetheless, because he couldn't read and write, you're telling me, it was never written down. Well, then why didn't Zaid ibn Thabit write it down? That's another question you've not answered yet. Nonetheless, by the time Muhammad died in 632, it had not been written down by men. Then it got written down by men. And then it got rewritten again. And then the rest of that disagree with it got burnt. Everything we've been showing today shows that this book is nothing more than a written text written by men, not preserved by God, had nothing to do with God. Doesn't even have to do with Muhammad. As Hatun said earlier, Muhammad wasn't there during the first writing. Muhammad was not there during the second writing. Both the first and second Qurans, Muhammad was not present. And the man that was given commission to make sure that it was complete still did not have a complete Quran. Because as we read at the very end now, if you could bring that up again, Hatun, just put that on the screen. As we read at the very end, there is still part of the Quran that he did not know about. Now remember, this is 20 years after writing the first Quran, where he had to get 2 verses from another man who was in a long distance. Now he's writing a second Quran, and it says, if you could just put it up on the screen.
Just give me a minute, Jane.
So while she's putting it up, he then, after this has been burnt and everything has been settled and the ashes have come to the ground, Zaid ibn Thabit then added, he said, a verse from Surah Ahzab was missed by me.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Read it again, please.
So a verse from Surah Ahzab, which is chapter 33,
yeah.
Surah 33, was missed by me when we copied the Quran. Now, hold on a minute. If they're just copying Hafsa's copy, that 33 should be there, right? Because they're just copying it.
But in here, he says, I missed it.
I missed it. And look at that. He didn't go back to Hafsa's copy. What did he do? So we searched for it. He didn't go say, Hafsa, bring me back that copy. Let me just see if I can find 33 verse 23. No, he didn't even do that because he knew that that wasn't even also in the first one. So he has to search for it until he finds this character named Khuzaima bin Thabit Al-Ansari. Now, this is not the Zaid ibn Thabit. This is Khuzaima ibn Thabit Al-Ansari. This is a similar name to the man we're talking about. But one is Zaid ibn Thabit. This is Khuzaima ibn Thabit Al-Ansari. And this is the verse. Amongst the believers are men who have been true in their covenant with Allah. So here, because he remembers hearing the Prophet recite this, he had forgotten it in 632. Now he remembers it in 652, 20 years later, but he still didn't know where to look for it. And so he had to go until he came across the Khuzaima. And then he takes Khuzaima's reference to it and adds it to this text. If that isn't human manipulation, if that isn't a book written by men, I don't know what is. That proves to me that this book is compiled by men, was retained by men, was corrected by men, and also was destroyed by men.
And we say, welcome to the world of Islam.
Hatun, it's been great. We've gone through this pretty well. I'm just looking at the comments here.
Okay, let me just stop sharing the screen. So do you have, can you see any response or any comments from Muslims? If you can see them, we make them our priority.
So far, I don't see any that are germane to what we're talking about.
Okay, there is a comment from Abbas Aga.
Kafir Linda Clark says, boom!
I think she meant, welcome to the world of Islam.
There you go.
So, a Muslim friend says, let's say Birmingham folios are written before Uthman compiled the Quran. That actually proves some copies survived and not being burned. But the fact that we have the Quran from the beginning.
Okay, you want me to answer that?
Sure, we did comment on that, but yeah, if you want to make another response for Abbas, that will be helpful.
Hatun, you're not feeling well. I know that this is playing you out and you're getting exhausted. So let me just quickly run this down and bring this to a conclusion. The Birmingham folios, if you notice 645, 568 to 645, look at the three stories, the three surahs that are in there. Chapter 18, chapter 19, and chapter 20 in the Quran. That's the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is the story of Alexander the Great. That was borrowed from another source. It's also the story of Moses in the burning bush. That is borrowed from another source. It's also the story of the seven sleepers. That is borrowed from another source. So you have three different stories that have nothing to do with Muhammad, that have nothing to do with the Arabs, all borrowed from outside sources, from Alexander the Great, which is Greek, from the seven sleepers of Ephesus, which would be Turkish, and you have it from the Bible itself, the story of Moses. These would have all been written long before the Quran. The fact, even if, let's just say hypothetically, that the Birmingham, the carbon datings are correct. Let's just say they are. I don't believe they are, because carbon datings are so inexact. We don't have time to get into that today. Even if they are correct, then I would suggest what you're looking at are nothing more than borrowed stories. These are the original stories from which the Quran then was put together. It borrowed these stories willy-nilly, put them together, and created the Quran that we have today at a much later date. But remember, carbon datings are not the dates of the ink, of the writing. The carbon datings are nothing more than the date that the animal, that the vellum or the parchment, that when the animal died. So all you're looking at is the date that the animal died, from which later on these animal skins were then cured, and then they were then made into a form that they could, pliable enough so they could then write on. The writing of the ink is the date you need to look at. We cannot date the ink because the pigments that are used in the ink are melanged from many different sources, many different time periods. Therefore, they cannot be dated. And that's why we have no idea when the Birmingham folios. Most people, in fact, the scholars like François de Roche, is saying that both those two folios do not belong to the manuscript that they were found in Birmingham. They actually belong to the Petropolitanus manuscript. The Petropolitanus manuscript has been dated to the early 8th century, about 60 years to 70 years later.
And also, if we are going to use Birmingham manuscripts as the Quran which survived before Uthman, I think we need to simply say, in somehow Uthman wasn't that good caliph that the things survived, even though he ordered it to be burned. So that says little bit about how awful his leadership was. Secondly, I think it will be better, or you would able to make better case if we find, let's say, Surah 9 verse 5, Surah 9 verse 29, or Surah 4 verse 157 or Surah 5 verse 116 in Birmingham manuscripts or Birmingham folies, but they are not there. They are not there. So just be careful how you interpreted your own Islamic sources, because every week you throw something out, everything you put little bit of your Islamic tradition under the bus. Very soon, as you get rid of all the hadith, you will also get rid of the Quran. I'm not sure if that's the place you want to be, but when that happens, there is always way for you to come to Lord Jesus Christ.
Now, let me just answer one more question. Brother Shamsi comes up and he says, if you know the basics of Arabic, you will know that the different dialect became different in written because each dialect have different words for the same thing. Learn Arabic, stop lying. Obviously, we know that. That's not what we're saying here. Shamsi, I'm not sure if you're an Arab scholar, if you know Arabic, or even if you've studied the history of Arabic. You need to understand, we're not talking about dialect. Dialects, of course, have different words for the same thing. I'm not suggesting that. That's not what we're saying here, because the Quran itself has one word for that thing, and that one word, for any, let's say, Malik, which is Malik. The word Malik is always Malik for the owner of the day. The same thing for kitab. The book kitab is always kitab. Doesn't matter what dialect you do it. But but you do have different derivations of that word depending on the vowelizations and depending how you read it. Now, whether you have a completely different word for a book that is not kitab, that would not appear in the written form, because if it's a completely different word, then you would have that would show up in the manuscripts. We don't see that in the earliest manuscripts. The words that are there are the right words. No one's disputing that they're not the right words. That's not in dispute. What we're disputing is that you have a different reading, that there you read it would be different. That cannot be shown in a consonantal text until you have the vowelization. Hope that helps. Anyways, we do need to wrap this up. You need to get some sleep. You've just got out of the hospital. We want to make sure you're healed. We want to make sure that you get completely healed, because this is exhausting.
Just one, Jay. So there is another comment. Muslim is asking from Abbas. So why do you accept Sana manuscripts carbon dating? Because it suits your agenda, Muslim makes a claim. So Sana manuscripts has lots of different carbon datings. Yeah. That is the problem. So we are. Jay was simply saying, it seems you were not here since the beginning. Please do watch the recording. Jay was making a case. Carbon datings are not trustworthy. But as a Muslim, you use Birmingham folios to make your case. Actually, Birmingham folios discredits the account in Sahih Bukhari. Jay is simply making a point. You can't like have both way. You need to pick one way, and the way you are gonna pick doesn't matter which way, it's gonna take you to hell. That's different topic.
Yeah, now we will be talking about carbon datings. That's and we will do that. But let me just say this real quickly. If you look, when we do get to the carbon datings, and when you look at the Sana manuscript, if Muslims are only going to look at the Birmingham folios and accept the dates of 568 to 645 from the Oxford lab in Oxford, England, if they're only going to accept that one, they've got to accept all the other carbon datings that have now come to fore since then, specifically the Sana manuscript, which is why we're bringing this up. And when you look at the Sana manuscript, which is an even earlier manuscript, it is the earliest. It's dated to 705 using paleographic evidence. When you look at that manuscript and you look at 4 laboratories that have done carbon datings on them, Lyon, Kiel, Zurich, and Oxford, including the same Oxford lab that did the one on the Birmingham folio, the dates that they give for the Sana manuscript go up to 550 and earlier. Muhammad wasn't even born until 570. So all of the 4 labs with the Sana manuscript give dates that are earlier than Muhammad, earlier than the Quran, and earlier than Islam. We're going to get into that in more detail in another live stream. So all we're asking is that you make sure that if you're going to make these claims, be consistent and make all the claims and take all on board. And what you're going to find is you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, because using carbon datings actually discredit the Quran. So don't even use them. They're too inexact. You need to stick to paleographical evidence, and you need to stick to cartological evidence. And that's what we've been using, is paleographical and cartological evidence, which is looking at the script, which is looking at the paper, which is dating the script, because scripts do change over time, which is looking at the script, the paper that it's written on, and also looking and seeing what kind of decorations that are made, especially between the surahs. Those are usually are decorations that come from buildings. And those buildings, we know when they were built. And that's why these manuscripts have to be written after those buildings were built. Also, we can also see that you can date manuscripts because of when the medallions are added, when they're not added. You can see how they've been squeezed in between letters. You can see that they aren't there originally, and we know when the medallions were added to these manuscripts. So all these different ways are much more accurate for dating manuscripts than certainly using carbon dating. But that's for another time. That's for another date. That's for a whole nother discussion.
Couple of people are asking for the reference for the how did they put the Qurans in the river in Egypt. Reference for that is the Gabriel Said. How do you read this name? This guy, Jay?
Gabriel Said Reynolds, and it's the Quran in its historical context.
Yeah, so it is in page. Read it, just page 2 to 5. It's just over there, please. you can get that reference, or another live stream we can show you the picture of it.
Put it up one more time so people can see it.
Yeah, that's the book, page 2.
Quran in its historical context.
Yeah. Very easy to read it. It's only a couple of 100 pages anyway. And first couple of pages summarize how they got the Quran and how did they decided to put it under the water. So it seems burning and putting in the river is some of the thing they simply do. Anyway,
that's how they solve their problems. That's not how we solve our problems.
Yeah. Did you get any other questions? Did you notice, Jay? Or
yeah, people are saying, Hatun, please buy a fan.
Buy a fan.
Hatun, you are an amazing inspiration.
Okay, let's just get on the topic.
They want you to get cooled down.
Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but I hope it's something good thing.
They think that you're exhausted. You look exhausted, and you are tired, Hatun. We do need to bring this to an end. Listen, it's been great being with you, and let me go ahead and just summarize for you what we've done today, and then we can bring it back to a conclusion, because I don't see any real strong arguments that have come up from any of the Muslims, and most of the Christians are just supporting what we're saying. There's 170 people watching who are watching it live. There'll be many others who will watch it after we put it up. Now, Hatun, can we bring it down to conclusion so we can bring it down within 2 hours?
Yeah, would you like to summarize it for us?
Let's do that. As we have done in both these two live streams, the one on July 4th and then the one today. These live streams are for you to actually unpack what we're studying, to unpack the research that we're doing, and we've purposely chosen this topic today to talk about the first two Qurans. We'll be talking about subsequent Qurans in later live streams. We'll be talking about the 6 major manuscripts that we mentioned today. We'll be going into the historical anachronisms. We'll be going into the source material. That's a whole nother talk for another time. We'll be going also into the diacritical variants, the 93,000 plus diacritical variants of the existing Qurans that we can see in Arabic today. Then we'll also end off with some of the new consonantal variants and some of the material that Dan Brubaker is coming up with. So we have an awful lot yet to get through, Hatun. But these first two Qurans, that's why we start off these first two Qurans are important for us to discuss, because we notice that they are 20 years apart. And they are the first that are tabulated by the Islamic traditions. The Abu Bakr's Quran from the time of 632 to 634, roughly 2 to 4 years after Muhammad's death, had not been written down by Muhammad. The questions we've asked back 2 weeks ago was, why did God, first of all, choose someone who couldn't read or write to give his greatest revelation? Secondly, if Muhammad could not read and write, why didn't he learn to read or write, since this was his major mission in life, was to receive this Quran and then give it to the world. Listen, it doesn't take much time to read and write, and to learn how to read and write Arabic. Not to know Arabic, but to read and write it. He already knew Arabic. It was his mother tongue. He was fluent in Arabic. To learn those 28 letters would have only taken 2 weeks. That's how long as it took me to read and write it. He had 22 years. Why did he do it? Also, secondly, why did he use Zaid ibn Thabit, who was his secretary? What is the responsibility of secretaries if they are not there to write what Muhammad had wanted to write down? So they certainly had access. They certainly had time. They certainly could have. He certainly could have written the entire Quran before Muhammad's death. Muhammad died in 632. It was not written down. Why? Because of what we've just read in Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509. Zaid ibn Thabit is called before Abu Bakr and Umar to write down the Quran, because many of those who memorized it were dying at the Battle of Yamama. He says, how can I do something the Prophet hadn't done? They insist that he does it. He finally agrees. He does write it down, and that is given to Abu Bakr, who gives it to Umar. Umar then gives it to Hafsa, who is one of the wives of Muhammad. While Muhammad was living, and she leaves it under her bed for 20 years. We then go to 510. And in 510, we get a second Quran. This is the second recension, as it's known. This is the one of Uthman. Uthman was in power at this time. He came to power in 656, I'm sorry, 646 to 656, so that 10-year period. So from around 652, he had been in power for about 6 years. Hudhaifa comes to him and says, we must do something because there are many different Qurans, and we don't want to do what the Jews and Christians have. We want to make sure that we only have one Quran. And so that's why he then orders Zaid ibn Thabit to take Hafsa's copy that she had stored under her bed, and along with 3 others, Zubair, Anas, and Hisham, to rewrite the Quran. So here you have a rewritten text, yet it was already written. Why do you have to rewrite it? Because according to Uthman, there would be a discussion or disagreement concerning what dialect they were going to use. We went into and explained that you can't have a dialectical difference in a written consonantal text that early, because you did not have anything that would show the different dialects one from the other until you have the vowelization. Once Zaid ibn Thabit, along the 3 others, wrote that Quran, then Uthman takes and copies it to 9 cities or 9 provinces: Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Aden, Alexandria, Nishapur, and Herat. Those are the 9 provinces he sends it to, with, as Hatun says, with someone to then read it and to have an authority over each one of those copies. So 9 copies were sent to 9 provinces, 9 cities. Where are they today? We don't know where they are. None of them exist. Not one of those 9 copies is in existence. That's a huge either ineptitude on everybody's part, or that these copies didn't exist to begin with. I would suggest the latter. I doubt that these copies ever existed, because there's no reason not to have survived, since we have 365 New Testament documents, either partial or complete, before the 6th century that we can go to. And these mostly were written under persecution. If we can come up with 365 either partial or complete copies of the New Testament from before the 6th century, why can't Muslims even come up from one of the 9 copies from the 7th century, written at a time of power? They controlled everything. They were in control of from all the way from, well, we know from what was today, what is Spain, all the way to Afghanistan or India. So that whole swath of land was under their control. Certainly someone could have retained it. Certainly someone could have read and written it. And certainly they could have preserved those 9 copies. They were not under persecution. Their Qurans were not being burnt by other people like Christians who are having their Bibles burnt. The Edict of Diocletian destroyed most of the New Testaments that existed at that time. That was in 300 AD. We don't know of any reference of anybody destroying any Qurans outside of Uthman, because the very next thing he does then, according to volume 6, 510, he then takes all the other manuscripts that disagreed, and that was not just partial manuscripts, whole manuscripts, so whole Qurans that disagreed, and burned them. Hugely significant. The fact that he burned them means that they disagreed, and he didn't want to keep anyone that disagreed. They burned them. That means they're no longer in existence today. Now, even after he burned them, then Zaid ibn Thabit realizes that he's missing one verse, chapter 33, verse 23. And he has to go look and finds another man with a similar name to him. And he finds it just with that one man, and then he includes it into the Quran. So it's still been recreated. It's still been added to, even in 652. Now, all of these prove me show one thing, Hatun, that this is a book created by men, written by men, changed and manipulated by men, burnt by men, and then restructured by yet other men.
Let me just add a couple of points you made, addition what you said. Couple of points important for me is Sahih Bukhari 509 and 510 shows oral tradition was not reliable at the time of the first caliphs. At the time of Abu Bakr to time of Uthman, oral tradition was not reliable. And then also tells us Uthman, who never communicated with Allah, who never had Gabriel came to him, went against Muhammad and went against Allah as he put together the second Quran. And also shows us, yep, Islamic tradition simply tells us completion of the Quran just simply messed up. But we are going to break them down to see actually what happened between first Quran to the Quran of Uthman. And then we will go through them, and then as Jay said, we will look at the manuscripts with all the carbon datings. Lots to look at, lots to learn, and lots to use it for the kingdom. Jay, thank you so much for making time for us.
Hatun, it's been a pleasure as usual. I always enjoy coming on with you. I do wish that you would get better. I do wish that you would get healthy.
Yeah,
I'm not any longer. I know that you look exhausted. You are exhausted. Can you please now go to bed and get your strength back?
No, I'm suffering from malaria, but by grace of God, I will recover. It will just take a little bit long time. So please, those of brothers and sisters who are watching, pray that by grace of God that I will get rid of this malaria and then get back to the life. So life is short. I can't waste it with dealing with malaria. But anyway, so that's on that side note. And thanks to everyone who joined us through chat. If you asked question and we haven't replied it, feel free to drop me email at info@dcciministries.com so we can deal with that. And also thank you very much for everyone who is doing admin in the chat. We really appreciate your help. And also, Jay, there was a comment. I don't know if it was also in the chat. It came to me through WhatsApp. In one point, you were drinking something. So
yeah, let me just show you what I'm drinking. This is not cattle urine. This is not beer. This is iced tea, which is a delicacy which we drink here in America. I don't expect you Brits to understand this. You Brits cannot drink tea without putting milk in it. We in America, we like iced tea, all right? It's sweet, it rejuvenates you, it cools you down, and it gives you a lot of glucose. I love it. I'm so happy to be able to drink it. I would love to share it with you. God bless you for even asking the question. Listen, this is nothing like what she drinks. She has huge bottles that are bigger than her head.
So that's not the camel urine.
Would you want to please take that back? That's desecrating my beautiful drink.
Actually, I've got 2 bottles of camel urine. When you come here, I can share with you. We haven't tried it. Brother Daniel was gonna try it, or Brother Godwin, but I think none of them were brave enough. So we still have them. If you ever want to try it, Jay.
Can I suggest that people just drink iced tea? It's a lot better than camel urine, and for a very good reason. It tastes a lot better.
And also those of you who are asking where is Daniel and Brother Godwin, Brother Daniel has life, so he's dealing with life. He's a bit busy, and same for Brother Godwin. We will have them back very soon. So anyway, that was like lots of conclusion and personal details. We will see you on another live stream, guys, or we will see you at Speaker's Corner. And once again, Jay, thank you very much for making time for us, and we will see you on another live stream.
Okay, God bless you. It's been great to be with you.